Imagine a world where the most powerful military machine on Earth suddenly stops moving because it ran out of fuel. In October 1973, the lights went out in the West and the American dream turned into a nightmare. Stock markets crashed and gas stations ran dry while ordinary citizens fought each other in long lines for a gallon of gas. For the first time in history, a group of developing nations held a knife to the throat of the global economy. They did not use nuclear bombs or massive armies to bring the West to its knees, but they used something far more dangerous. They used the valve, and they proved that whoever controls the flow of energy can dictate the politics of the world. This is the story of how the hunters became the hunted and how the Seven Sisters finally met their match. Welcome back to Hidden Logic, where today we are analyzing the rise of OPEC and the Great Oil Shock of 1973. To understand this explosion, we must go back to a quiet meeting in Baghdad in September 1960. While the world was distracted, 5 men gathered in a hot room to form a counter-alliance against the Seven Sisters. They were from Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, and Venezuela, and they were tired of being exploited by Western corporations. Their leader was a brilliant Venezuelan strategist named Juan Pablo Pérez Alfonso, who is often called the father of OPEC. His logic was simple: we own the oil, so why are we letting foreign companies set the price and take the profits? They formed the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, not to destroy the West but to demand a fair share. For a decade, nobody took them seriously, and the Seven Sisters laughed at them, thinking they were too weak to unite. They believed that the Arabs could not drink their oil and would eventually come crawling back to the Western companies. But the mood changed dramatically in 1971 in Tehran when the Shah of Iran gave a historic interview. He looked directly into the cameras of the Western press and delivered an ultimatum that sent shivers down the spine of Washington. He said, "You buy our oil for pennies and sell it back to us as expensive manufactured goods, and this exploitation is over." This was the warning shot that the West ignored because they still believed that they held all the cards in this game. But the real turning point arrived on October 6, 1973, on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar. Egypt and Syria launched a massive surprise-coordinated attack on Israel, attempting to reclaim the territories lost in previous wars. The Israeli military was caught off guard, and for the first few days it looked like they might be completely overrun. In a panic, Prime Minister Golda Meir called Washington and begged for immediate military supplies to save her country from destruction. President Nixon ordered Operation Nickel Gross, which was a massive airlift of American tanks and weapons directly into Israel. But Nixon made a fatal mistake because he did not do this quietly. He did it publicly and aggressively, humiliating the Arab leaders. King Faisal of Saudi Arabia, who was previously a friend of America, felt personally betrayed by this public support of his enemy. He sent a direct message to Washington demanding that the airlift stop immediately or the oil would stop flowing to the West. Nixon and his advisor Henry Kissinger ignored him, thinking it was a bluff and that the Saudis would never hurt their own income. It was not a bluff, and on October 16, the Arab ministers met in Kuwait and decided to unleash the oil weapon. They raised the price of oil by 70% overnight and announced a production cut of 5% every single month. Then they dropped the nuclear option, which was a total embargo against the United States and the Netherlands for supporting Israel. The architect of this strategy was the Saudi oil minister Ahmed Zaki Yamani, who became the face of the crisis on TV. Yamani did not just cut the oil, he played a psychological game with the West, keeping them guessing about the next move. I want to hit the pause button right here because I need to ask you a critical question about energy independence. Do you believe that the Western world has learned its lesson from 1973, or are we still addicted to foreign energy? Look at your life today, from your car to your plastic products, and tell me if we are truly independent. Go to the comment section right now and type the word addicted if you think we are still slaves to global energy prices. Or type the word independent if you think green energy has finally broken these chains forever. So let the debate begin. But I also have a mission for you, because this knowledge is useless if it stays hidden in the dark. It is your responsibility to break the silence, so share this video right now on your private WhatsApp groups or Twitter. Send this link to someone who complains about gas prices and show them where the real control actually comes from. The embargo hit the global economy like a sledgehammer, and the price of a barrel of oil quadrupled in just a few months. In the United States, the panic was absolute as gas stations raised flags to show they had no fuel left to sell. Truck drivers went on strike, blocking highways and shooting at other drivers who tried to break the picket lines in desperation. People began to hoard gasoline in their basements, causing fires and explosions across the suburbs of America as society started to crack. The government implemented an odd-even rationing system where you could only buy gas on certain days based on your license plate. For the first time, Americans realized that their superpower status meant nothing if they could not fuel their tanks and factories. The crisis also shattered the NATO alliance as European nations panicked and refused to let American supply planes land on their soil. They were terrified that OPEC would cut their oil so they bowed down to the demands of the Arab producers immediately. Japan, which imports almost all of its oil, went into a state of national emergency and completely changed its foreign policy toward Israel. The Seven Sisters lost their absolute control over prices, and the producers were now the kings of the New World Order. However, there is a hidden paradox in this story that most history books completely ignore regarding the Seven Sisters' profits. While the Western consumer suffered in long lines, Exxon and Shell actually reported record-breaking profits during the crisis year. They simply passed the higher costs to the consumers, proving that in a crisis the middleman always wins the game. But as the crisis deepened, a darker plan began to form in the war rooms of the Pentagon, known as Operation Dhahran. Desperate to restore the flow of oil, Henry Kissinger and the U.S. military seriously considered invading Saudi Arabia and seizing the oil fields. Leaked documents revealed plans for paratroopers to drop onto the oil installations in the eastern province to secure the energy supply by force. King Faisal responded to this threat with chilling calmness, stating that they would blow up the oil fields for letting Americans take them. He famously said that his ancestors survived on dates and milk in the desert, and his people were ready to do it again. This standoff brought the world to the brink of a much larger conflict that could have turned the Cold War hot immediately. This was the greatest transfer of wealth in human history. Billions of dollars flowed from the west to the Persian Gulf. Suddenly, the desert nations were swimming in cash, and they began to build modern cities like Dubai and Riyadh from scratch. Western politicians and bankers flew to the Middle East not to give orders, but to beg for loans and investment capital. But this massive influx of cash created a new problem for the global financial system that few people talk about. The US dollar was in danger of collapsing because the American trade deficit was exploding due to the high oil prices. If the world lost confidence in the dollar, the American empire would crumble under the weight of its own debt and inflation. They needed a way to get that money back, and they needed a way to make sure oil was always priced in dollars. This desperation would lead to the most brilliant and sinister financial arrangement in history, which is still in effect today. The embargo ended in March 1974, but the real game was just beginning behind closed doors in Washington and Riyadh. The United States sent a man named Henry Kissinger on a secret mission that would change the value of money forever. He carried a proposal that would save the US dollar and enslave the world in debt for the next 50 years. You think you pay for oil with money, but you are actually paying with a currency that is backed by a secret treaty. In the next episode, we will expose the petrodollar pact and reveal how the US convinced Saudi Arabia to sell its soul. We will show you the document that forces you to use US dollars for energy even if you live in Europe or Asia. Subscribe now and hit the bell, because you cannot afford to miss the hidden logic of the money in your pocket. See you in the next analysis, where we reveal the secret contract that rules the world.